I've always been told I'm a good listener. People trust me with their secrets, their fears, their darkest thoughts. But there's one secret no one ever told me, because they didn't know it either. A year ago, I discovered that I exist in two places at once, and neither version of me knows why. That's how this story begins, not with screams or shadows, but with silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like it has weight, like it could crush you if you let it linger too long. That's what happened to me on October 14th last year. It started with an email, a simple, unassuming message from someone named Elias. The subject line read, "You need to see this." At first glance, it seemed like spam, but something about the sender's name felt familiar, like deja vu wrapped in static electricity. My finger hovered over the delete button before curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single image attachment and 3 sentences. "This is you. Don't ask how I know. Start looking for answers." The photo showed a man standing in front of a dilapidated gas station somewhere desolate. He wore a black hoodie pulled tight against the wind. His face wasn't fully visible. It was angled slightly away from the camera, but I recognized him instantly. It was me, or at least someone who looked exactly like me. Now, here's where things get strange. I hadn't set foot near any gas stations that week, or even left my apartment much, for that matter. Yet there I was, staring back at myself through pixels. For hours, I stared at that picture, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was photoshopped. Maybe someone was messing with me. But deep down, I knew those excuses were hollow. Something about the way he stood, the tilt of his head, the faint scar above his eyebrow, it all screamed authenticity. So I did what anyone would do when faced with the impossible. I ignored it. Sort of. I tucked the email into a folder labeled weird shit and went about my life as usual, until the next day when I received another email from Elias. This time, the photo showed the same man, me, at a bus stop downtown. Again, I had no memory of being there. No receipts, no GPS data on my phone, nothing. Just a growing pit in my stomach telling me that reality wasn't behaving as it should. Over the next few weeks, the emails kept coming. Each one contained a new photo of me in places I'd never been. A diner in Ohio, a park bench in Chicago, a deserted beach at sunset. Sometimes the images were mundane. Other times, they hinted at urgency. In one, I appeared to be running towards something or someone off camera. Another showed me sitting alone in a dimly lit room, writing furiously in a notebook. What was I writing? Why couldn't I remember? Then came the voice messages. They arrived sporadically, always late at night, always distorted. One said simply, "They're watching you." Another whispered, "Find the bridge." None of it made sense. None of it connected. But each word burrowed deeper into my mind until paranoia became my constant companion. By now, you're probably wondering why I didn't go to the police. Truth is, I almost did. But then I found the note. It was tucked inside the pages of a book I hadn't opened in years. A dog-eared copy of the Metamorphosis. Written in shaky handwriting across the yellowed paper were these words: "Stop looking for answers. You won't like what you find." I froze, because that wasn't my handwriting. Not entirely. It was close enough to pass as mine, but subtly different, like a mirror reflection flipped sideways. And suddenly, everything clicked, or rather, fractured, because whoever wrote that note knew me intimately. Knew my habits, my fears, my quirks. Knew me better than I knew myself. But here's the kicker. I still hadn't figured out the most disturbing part yet. Not until the day I saw him. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was grabbing coffee in my usual spot. As I waited in line, I glanced out the window, and there he was, standing across the street, staring directly at me. Same hoodie, same posture, same scar above his eyebrow. Except this time, he wasn't frozen in a photograph. He was alive, breathing, real. My heart pounded as I stepped outside, abandoning my coffee order. Across the street, he turned and walked away without a word. I followed him, shouting questions he ignored. We wove through alleys, past parked cars, under flickering streetlights. Finally, he stopped beneath an overpass and turned to face me. "Who are you?" I demanded, breathless. He smiled faintly. "The question isn't who I am," he said. "It's who you are." Before I could respond, he vanished into thin air, just disappeared. like smoke dissolving into shadow. I stood there, stunned, clutching empty space where he'd been moments earlier. And then I woke up. At least I thought I did. Because when I opened my eyes, I was lying in bed, sunlight streaming through the blinds. Everything felt normal again, too normal, until I rolled over and saw the notebook beside me. Flipping it open, I found pages filled with frantic scribbles, notes detailing every email, every photo, every encounter with a man who looked like me. Notes written in handwriting that wasn't mine. That's when I realized I'm not the only one living my life. Somewhere out there, another version of me exists, and he knows things I don't, things I may never understand. You ever wake up and feel like you've been living someone else's dream? That's what it felt like after I found the notebook. Every word, every detail, it was all real, but none of it belonged to me. At least, not the me I thought I knew. And yet, here was proof that I'd lived another life while my body slept. Or had I? I tried to piece together what happened next, but the timeline didn't make sense. My phone showed no missed calls, no texts, nothing unusual from the previous day. According to my calendar, I'd spent the entire afternoon working on a project for work, but the notebook said otherwise. It described chasing him through the city, confronting him under the overpass, and then nothing, just blank pages. That's when I noticed something strange about the handwriting. It wasn't consistent. Some entries were written in my familiar scrawl, but others, longer passages filled with cryptic phrases, were penned in that same mirrored version of my own hand. Phrases like, "The bridge is both beginning and end. Time loops where space folds. He watches because he can't remember." Whoever, or whatever, had taken control of my body during those lost hours, they weren't just writing notes. They were leaving breadcrumbs, clues meant for me to follow. But why? And to where? I decided to retrace my steps. Literally, using the descriptions in the notebook, I went back to the gas station from the first photo Elias sent. Then the bus stop, the diner, the park bench. Each location felt eerily familiar, as though I'd visited them before. Not just seen them in pictures, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. At the deserted beach mentioned in one of the photos, I found something chilling. Footprints in the sand. They led straight into the water, vanishing beneath the waves. There was no sign of anyone nearby, but the prints were fresh. Too fresh, as if whoever made them had only just disappeared. Then came the whispers, faint voices carried by the wind, speaking words I couldn't quite understand. I turned around, expecting to see someone behind me, but the beach was empty. Still, the voices persisted, growing louder, more insistent. One phrase stood out among the chaos. "Find the bridge." It was the same message from the voicemails. The same clue Elias kept dropping without explanation. Whatever this bridge was, it clearly mattered. But where was it? And what'd I find there? Back home, I pored over maps, searching for anything resembling a bridge within driving distance. Hours passed before I stumbled upon something peculiar. An old railway bridge spanning a narrow gorge outside town. Abandoned decades ago, it barely registered on most maps. Yet something about it called to me, a magnetic pull I couldn't ignore. When I arrived, the air felt heavier, charged with an energy that prickled my skin. The bridge itself looked like it had been plucked from a nightmare. Rusting steel beams twisted upward like skeletal fingers, and vines clawed their way across its surface. Halfway across, a figure stood silhouetted against the setting sun. It was him, again. This time, I approached cautiously, calling out his name, or mine, depending on how you look at it. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. For a moment, we simply stared at each other, two halves of the same whole separated by some invisible divide. "You shouldn't have come," he said finally, his voice low and strained. "What?" I asked. "What are you doing here? What am I doing here?" He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder toward the horizon. When he spoke again, his tone carried an urgency that sent chills down my spine. "We're not supposed to meet like this," he said. "Every time our paths cross, the threads unravel further. Soon, neither of us will exist." "What threads?" I demanded. "Explain yourself." But instead of answering, he pointed toward the far end of the bridge. Beyond it lay a dense forest bathed in twilight shadows. Somewhere deep inside, a light flickered faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. That's where it begins, he said, and ends. Go there, and you'll understand everything. Before I could respond, he stepped backward off the edge of the bridge. No scream, no splash, just silence. I rushed to the railing, peering over the side, but there was nothing below except jagged rocks and rushing water. He was gone. For a long time, I stood frozen, torn between fear and curiosity. Finally, I made my decision. If answers waited beyond that forest, I had to find them, even if it cost me everything. The journey through the woods felt surreal, like walking through a dream. The trees seemed taller than they should be, their branches intertwining overhead to form a canopy that blocked out the stars. The air grew colder with each step, and the light ahead pulsed brighter, drawing me closer. When I reached the source, I stopped dead in my tracks. Nestled in a clearing stood a small cabin, its windows glowing warmly despite the oppressive darkness surrounding it. Something about it felt wrong, like it existed outside of time and space, a fragment of reality stitched onto the fabric of the world. Inside, I found a single room filled with objects that defied logic. Clocks ticking backward, mirrors reflecting scenes I'd never witnessed. And in the center of it all, a table covered in photographs. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. All of me, all of him. But one picture caught my eye immediately. It showed both of us standing side by side, smiling like old friends reunited after years apart. Except neither of us remembered taking it. Beneath the frame lay a note, written in that same mirrored handwriting. Now you know. Choose wisely. Choose what? I wondered. And then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned slowly, my breath catching in my throat. Standing in the doorway was him. Me, the other version of myself. But this time, he wasn't running or vanishing into thin air. He was calm, almost serene, as if he'd been expecting me. You found it, he said softly, his voice carrying a weight that made the room feel smaller. The place where we began. Began what? I asked, my own voice trembling. What is this? What are you? He stepped closer, his movements deliberate, like every step had been rehearsed. When he stopped, he placed a hand on the table, brushing his fingers lightly over the photograph of us together. This, he said, gesturing to the cabin and everything inside it, is the nexus, a point outside of time where our lives intersect, where they've always intersected. My mind raced, trying to process his words. You're saying we're connected somehow, that we share a life? He nodded, but there was sadness in his eyes, a deep, unshakable sorrow. Not just a life, a consciousness. We're fragments of the same soul, split apart by forces neither of us fully understands. You live your days, unaware of me, and I live mine, piecing together the moments you leave behind. The emails, I whispered, realization dawning. The photos, the notes, they were all from you. Yes, he admitted. I've been trying to guide you here, to make you see the truth before it's too late. Too late for what? I demanded, my voice rising with frustration. Why does any of this matter? His expression hardened, and for a moment, I saw something primal in him. A flicker of fear masked by resolve. Because the threads are unraveling faster now. Every time we cross paths, every time one of us tries to interfere with the other's existence, reality weakens. If we don't fix this, neither of us will survive. Fix it how? I shot back. You still haven't told me what this even is. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, tarnished key. Holding it up between two fingers, he studied it carefully, as though weighing whether to trust me. This key unlocks the final piece of the puzzle, he said. It leads to a door hidden beneath the bridge. On the other side, well, let's just say it's not something either of us is ready to face alone. I stared at the key, my pulse quickening. So what do? We go together, he replied. But there's a catch. He paused, his gaze locking onto mine. Only one of us can come back. A cold knot formed in my stomach. What do you mean? There's a choice waiting for us beyond that door, he explained. One of us has to stay behind, to anchor the fracture, to keep the threads intact. The other gets to walk away, to live a complete life without interruptions. But whoever stays, his voice trailed off, heavy with implication, dies. I finished for him. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he walked past me, stopping near the glowing mirrors lining the walls. Reaching out, he touched one, causing ripples to spread across its surface like water. Within the shifting reflection, I caught glimpses of memories. Not mine, but his. Scenes of isolation, of endless nights spent watching me sleep, of desperate attempts to communicate through cryptic messages and fleeting encounters. "I've been living in the shadows for years," he said quietly. "Watching you, protecting you, making sure you stayed on the right path. But I'm tired. I don't know how much longer I can hold on." Something about his confession struck a chord deep within me. For the first time, I felt a connection to him, not as a stranger or a duplicate, but as a part of myself, a fractured piece of my soul that had been lost and forgotten. "If we go through with this," I said, "how do we decide who stays and who goes?" "That's the hardest part," he admitted. "There's no fair way to choose, no test or trial to determine who deserves it more. In the end, it comes down to sacrifice. One of us has to give up everything for the sake of the other." We stood in silence for a long while, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. Finally, I broke the quiet. "Let's go," I said firmly. "Whatever's waiting for us beyond that door, we'll face it together. Then we'll decide." He nodded, slipping the key into his pocket. Together, we left the cabin and retraced our steps through the forest, the pulsing light fading behind us. The journey back to the bridge felt shorter this time, as though the distance between worlds had collapsed. When we reached the edge of the gorge, he led me to a narrow staircase carved into the rock face, descending into darkness below. At the bottom, we found the door, an ancient, iron-bound slab etched with symbols I couldn't decipher. Without hesitation, he inserted the key and turned it. The hinges groaned as the door creaked open, revealing a blinding white light beyond. "Ready?" he asked, glancing at me one last time. "No," I admitted, "but let's do it anyway." Side by side, we stepped through the threshold, and everything changed. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing alone on the bridge. The sun was rising, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream, but then I noticed something clutched in my hand, the key, and written on the palm of my opposite hand, in faint but unmistakable letters, were 3 words. "Thank you."